So first, let me say it's great to be back again this year. I think last year was the first year in like 20 years I wasn't here. Mark, Naved, Helane, great to have you up on stage with us. It seems like every other year we're here, there's some other big, huge thing that's going to totally upend the travel ecosystem. And I guess this year that threat or that opportunity is AI. So I want to dig into that a little bit. Maybe I'll take a bit of a contrarian view to start things off here. So I've personally tried 25 to 30 different AI travel planners, and I've got to say it's massively underwhelming so far. You know, I'm getting back a bunch of traditional links that I would see in paid search. I'm not getting personalized recommendations, and there's no real integration of booking functionality. So feel free to tell me I'm crazy. But I guess my opening question for you guys is, how far away are we from some big game-changing, consumer-facing change? Mark, let me start with you.
Well, you are crazy.
Thank you, sir.
And then I don't know how far we are from a game-changing change, but I sort of, when I saw that ChatGPT app kind of put up in Expedia, and I know Julie was asked about it earlier, and way too early to make any calls on how well it's going to do. But to me, that's sort of like the obvious great application. Anything that can address customer service needs, anything that leads to greater personalization. So all you're doing is taking bigger and bigger data sets and applying better intelligence, faster intelligence to it. And if you can personalize the travel, shopping, searching, booking experience, very data-rich, processes. Like this should be there should be a wonderful application in here for artificial intelligence. So anyway, I would sort of hope that we'd see that either Expedia or Booking or one of the other companies. I know they've been using artificial intelligence and machine learning for years to improve their processes. I just think we just took a step function, step up, increase, whatever, in being able to use data and for to eliminate customer service requests or to better address them, to better personalize the experience. We should see something. I don't know how soon it's going to be. I don't think it's a decade. I don't think it's 5 years. I would expect to see something really obvious to the average user within the next year or two.
Naved?
Yeah. So I recently wrote on this, and we did a compare contrast of what each OTA is doing and how far along they are. I think this is a case of something just got announced, and everybody expects it to take off massively and a big change to happen right away. I think we are in the first half or the first inning of a very long game, maybe 9 or 10 or 11 inning game. But at the same time, I think we as humans think linearly, and this thing might actually change things exponentially, meaning do not expect a linear change. Expect step function changes with every iteration. So based on the work that we did, we saw that just within a space of 2 months, Booking, Expedia, and other OTAs had kind of iterated and taken their offering further, and the results were actually looking very different from what the initial iteration was. So I suspect we might be surprised if we start to see things change in terms of consumer use behavior and the funnel itself in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. And Helane, how are the airlines integrating AI, whether on the front end or on the back end?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. What we're seeing is their use of the mobile app more aggressively, pushing data to you, number one. Number two, the idea that if you're booking, you can be automatically referred to not only the flight, but do you want the hotel as well? Do you want a rental car? What else do you want? If you have issues, you can use their chat function. So it makes it very easier. And I think as the population, as younger people travel more, you're probably going to see more technology improvements because they're so used to doing everything on their phones, unlike some folks who like either a computer, a laptop, or an iPad.
So Naved and Mark, I did not hear you guys really talk about the big platforms, Bard, Bing, ChatGPT. Mostly I heard you guys talk about OTAs and what they're doing. Who's better positioned to win in this sort of creation of the super AI app for the consumer? Is it in fact the OTA, or do you think it might be more the platforms in the race?
You want to go first? So look, I think if you look at the funnel, the top of the funnel today, I think Google is kind of at the top, right? And you have a massive share there in that. ChatGPT, very, very little share. So in the best case for Google, they maintain that. The other case is that maybe they cede some share to other players. And this is something we wrote about in the report that we published. You might actually see the funnel change. Right now, it's very concentrated at the top, just a few players. You might start to see like bots take some share, smart speakers, which we kind of all saw sort of come and go and really didn't make a dent. You might see smart speakers powering AI at the back end, and again take some more share. If you asked me who is better positioned, I would say probably the OTAs. I think the fact that they connect, more than 1 million hotels and properties to the end consumers, it's hard to replace. They can probably bring in some functionality and deliver maybe higher value to the consumer. So I would say the OTAs.
Yeah, I'm probably only supposed to be asking questions, but I think I'll weigh in a little bit here too, right? So my primary thought is the OTAs have 20-some years of behavioral data. They've got payment platforms. They connect millions of hotels around the world to those payment platforms. It seems to me like those are the key tools that you would need to make sort of this consumer-facing AI super app, if you will. So, I would argue, I think they're pretty well positioned in that. Switching gears a little bit, I want to think about monetization, because we're financial people, and I guess that's what we do. How do you think the monetization model evolves, Mark, when you're looking at the big platform, a Bard or a Bing? How do they get paid in the AI product?
Well, first, real quickly, I think the AI winners are those with the largest data sets, the most capital, because this is an extremely, it's getting more expensive, and then with enough critical mass of really high quality engineers, and that last one may be the real gating factor. There's only so many really great AI scientists. I've taken all my kids and told them to stop studying Mandarin and start studying AI, learning AI tools for their future. So. But I think that's going to be the gating factor, and so my guess is that the big platforms, that's actually where they win. Although there's going to be room for an upstart. I mean, OpenAI, there's an upstart for you, so you don't have to be a massive platform to actually win. And then monetization, just anything that makes the service better, more personalized, you monetize it the way you have all along. So you'll just get, from a travel perspective, I think you'd find a better look to book ratio. Yeah. You should be able, if it's more personalized, you should have higher customer satisfaction. So more personalized, higher satisfaction, more spend, better retention. And these businesses are so large now that getting new customers is probably much less important than retaining the existing ones, and it just at the margin, slightly increasing the frequency of their usage with you. That has much bigger returns. So that's, my guess, is how they monetize.
Now, I don't want to spend all of our time talking just AI here. So my last question is, if you had to pick one stock in your coverage universe that's probably best positioned to ride the wave, which one would it be? Helane?
Well, I don't really cover that space. So I would just focus on the airline side. And our top pick for 2023 was United, followed by Copa and Delta.
And AI does not play.
It doesn't, not really in what we're doing. I mean, from the app perspective, I think United and Delta certainly have done a really great job of moving things forward for ease of use for customers. A lot of what they're doing is pushing information to you so that if there's a weather delay or a flight is canceled, you can make the decision about when to change your flight or delays, or you make the choice to rebook. And they are probably two of the best at it right now.
Yep. Naved, what do you have?
So you asked me which stock is best positioned to benefit from AI, right? I think we are in very early days, so it's hard to predict who's going to win the race when it just got started. But structurally, which business is better positioned in this race? I want to say, so if you look at the sort of the filters, right? So if you have to be critical mass, you have to be big because you can make the investments. So the big three would qualify there. and then you look at what kind of differentiation you can create on top of whatever offering you have. I would say Airbnb is has a very differentiated inventory, which is hard to replicate anywhere else, and it's also that every place that they offer, every listing is different because it's a home or an apartment. So they probably qualify in that sense. I think Expedia with its new loyalty program has brought something interesting to the table, which you can layer on top of AI, which every other OTA will try to do. So those kind of come to my mind.
I like it. Interesting. Mark?
Not in the travel space. I really like Amazon, and I think it's the market's already decided that Microsoft and NVIDIA are big winners. I think they underappreciate that Amazon, the Gen AI revolution will not be televised. It will not be on-prem. It's going to be in the cloud, and the leading cloud provider today is probably going to be the leading cloud provider of tomorrow, and that's AWS and Amazon.
Nice. So if most conversations of late start with AI, they very quickly turn to the economy. And it seems like every other week we flip back and forth from soft landing, hard landing. What are you guys hearing on the street from your companies? How is consumer behavior starting to change? Helane, let's start.
Well, we've definitely seen a lot of weakness in the consumer, especially the lower income consumer. A lot of, I think I'll just stop and say that I think there's a lot of people who seem to think we've had a soft landing or we're in the process of having one. Yeah. I think the consensus is often wrong, but we've definitely in travel this year, we saw a big shift away from domestic travel to international European travel. I would say that Delta's worst customer is Spirit's best customer. And that's where you've seen a lot of weakness in that whole basic economy travel experience where people have either opted out or they've opted to drive because the airfares had gotten so high. And of course, that was unsustainable. And we saw that come down. We've seen airfares come down. We've seen an increase in discounting, especially in the domestic US market where we have overcapacity right now.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of dovetail on the demographic theme of that. Where we've heard about weakness has been with the meta-search sites like TripAdvisor and Trivago, where they've talked about seeing some trade-down sort of activity. Naved, anything on your side?
Yes, so just sticking to to travel. So you're right about TripAdvisor and Trivago talking about some weakness, but at the same time, if you kind of look at their appeal, I think they appeal more to the value consumers who shop around versus convenience buyers. So I think the overarching commentary is there is still a lot of appetite for travel. I think it has shown a lot of resiliency compared to other sectors like retail, where people may be spending less now, but there is still a very high intent for travel demand.
Yeah.
You've got 3 companies, Booking, Expedia, and Airbnb, that I think account for about a quarter of all leisure travel bookings worldwide. Like, it's a big chunky number, and if it's not a quarter, you're ballpark close to it. So what are they saying? And the 3 of them are pretty consistently saying outside of the shock to travel occurred by October 7th, outside of that there's not any trade down, that there's not any trade down in terms of the length of vacation or in terms of the star, quality of the price of the hotel that people are going to. So I'm sure it's going to soften at some point. Now, it's going to soften versus that peak that we had last year, but the most recent survey that we ran, actually we see intent to travel is higher going into 24 than it was going into 23. And I don't know whether there's a real structural change, cultural change, behavioral change caused by COVID or not. It's a plausible thesis. I just don't think we're going to have a dramatic fall off in demand for travel. I don't think it happens in the next 12 to 18 months, barring a real shock to the economy.
Yeah. So it sounds like what I'm hearing, if I put it all together, right, it's low-cost carriers, we're maybe seeing a little bit of weakness at the bottom end of the demographic profile. Maybe Trip and Trivago play into that same demographic, but perhaps the OTAs are catering to a bit of a higher-end demographic where we haven't really seen that sort of weakness move up yet. Online travel's all grown up now, right? So if we go back to the 08-09 recession, I think online penetration in the US was maybe 35 to 40%. It's probably 60% now. So if we are headed towards a recession, how does that change how they behave, right? They don't have that secular offset. So what do you think about performance in a down economic scenario? Naved?
So when you think about online travel and think about the OTA business, marketplace business, keep in mind that one of the benefits of a marketplace is it lets you choose. So if a consumer gets softer, right, they want to spend but spend less, they are more likely to shop around, and therefore there is some sort of structural resiliency built into that model. Having said that, if the broader economy is softer, I think it affects everybody, but I think to a lesser degree the online travel guys, just because of the model that they operate with. Remember in the last 2 recessions, right, 08 and the one before that, the OTAs actually took share from offline.
Yeah.
And you're probably right. We are not at 30% share. We are probably 60 plus in terms of market share for online. But I think you will again see a slight step change for online.
Yeah, and the other thing I saw in the last recession was, well, OTA bookings, certainly took a hit. Margins actually went up, right? They have something a lot of other players in the travel space don't, a big variable cost in their marketing, which they were able to tone down to protect margin. Any thoughts, Mark?
Well, I think in a soft recession, in a modest recession, I don't think you'll see a dramatic change in travel spend. In a material recession, you were. I just think we all need to step back and reach the conclusion, I think, for now, barring a major shock, and it can always happen. You could have another Ukraine, a Taiwan, or something like that. You always have to be ready for those black swan events. But barring that, the odds of a severe recession have come down materially. It is a shock. I mean, we had dramatic shocks to the world economy in the beginning of last year. It created a lot of what were transitory factors. The Fed was criticized for using that term, but they actually may have been right. And to the extent that inflation comes down and the economy slows modestly, I think the odds of a soft landing have increased substantially, and that may be the probable outcome, slightly greater than 50% chance, but the probable outcome here. So I don't think I'll stick with my guns on this. I don't think we're gonna see a major fall off in travel demand for the next 12 to 24 months, barring an external shock.
All right, so a bit of a different angle, Helane. Congestion in the skies, government response. What does that mean for airlines next year, and what does it mean for consumers over the next couple of years?
Well, the trend has, in general, been for higher airfares, especially during the peak. So a couple of things to think about. The FAA has really underperformed and has really let the industry down. I understand if government wants to take over and continue to do safety and security. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with air traffic control getting reauthorized every 5 years. It's been a disaster. We're short 3,500 air traffic controllers. More are retiring than we can hire. The FAA this year had a budget for 1,500. We're only able to find 900 and some odd. We're losing about 200 to 300 through the training process where they don't make it through, and another 200 to 300 in retirements. So if we're short 3,600 and we're only qualifying 600, then we're short 6 years. It will take 6 years to catch up, and that's a problem because when there's demand for air travel and air quotes, everybody wants experiences and have bought all their goods, their services, whatever, or their goods, right? You don't need another stationary bike or treadmill or whatever. You want that experience, but in New York, we have a problem in North Florida to start. Jacksonville Tower is understaffed. New York towers are grossly understaffed. Capacity in the market was down 10% this year, and the government asked the 4 major airlines to cut capacity another 10%. Well, what happens when there's demand?
I'm betting airfares go up.
Fares go up, right? Demand.
Yeah.
We're down internationally by about 10%, and we're down business travel by about 10 or 15%. And yet the number of people we are putting through TSA checkpoints every day is up somewhere between 5 and 10%, depending on the day. So what happens when people want to travel? There's a shift to more seats per departure and fewer departures per day, and airfares go up.
So I want to switch gears a bit from macro and AI, maybe talk a little bit of regulatory. So there's been a lot of pressure on Google and many others, Apple, and over the last few years. It does feel like maybe it's finally coming to a head. A lot of scrutiny around things like self-preferencing in search results, alternative payments in the app stores. How do you guys think about, number one, a timeline to when we might see some change, number two, probability of real change, and then three, are there any winners and losers you could pull out from potential regulatory changes? Mark, what do you think?
Well, we've had a much greater tightening of the regulatory focus, I guess, over the last couple of years. You've seen this with the Biden administration, the FTC, and the DOJ. And yet, it looks like it's peaked. You know, when the attempt to block the Microsoft Activision merger was so roundly, I don't have an opinion on it one way or another, but the facts are that it was so roundly defeated in court. The FTC and the DOJ's arguments were so roundly put down. It just seems like I mean, things can change, but it just seems like the regulatory risk is behind us. I don't know about the booking acquisition though in Europe, but I do think the regulatory focus has, I don't know, it may not have peaked in Europe. I think it's peaked in the US and the pressures are going to come down.
So no big change is the bottom line?
Yes.
Okay, Naved, what do you think?
So in Europe, we have the Digital Markets Act sort of start to layer in early next year. I think you'll see some impact of that. In the US, it's TBD. I mean, there are a couple of cases that are making their way through the court still. But just going by how the tech companies responded, I want to say when the regulators like the ZAG, and they basically found a good way to kind of work through the regulation just to preserve the business and grow on top of that. So I wouldn't bet against the tech unicorn, the tech companies, unless there is some outright sort of regulation that requires a breakup of a company or something like that.
Yeah, and we are running short on time. I guess my last quick question to you guys is, short on housing inventory, short on rental inventory, Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking have probably 16 million listings tied up. Is the threat of regulation in short-term rental a real financial threat, Mark?
I hope not. I think New York City is going to be the exception.
Yep. Nice, nicely put. And I think with that, we are out of time. So join me in thanking Mark, Naved, and Helane. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jake.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.